could see me punching the bejesus out of that moose.
Alright, so we're on a holiday road with the Griswolds in the first vacation calamity, 1983's National Lampoon's Vacation, starring series regulars Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, and Randy Quaid, alongside appearances by Eugene Levy, John Candy, Christie Brinkley, and director Harold Ramis. Sort of. Clark Griswold is on a
pilgrimage to see a moose
as he attempts to take his family on a cross-country road trip, destination Wally World. Naturally, everything goes wrong, from bad turns to late ones. Frequently appearing in top critic lists of the greatest comedies of all time, the first Vacation was a hit, spawning 3 sequels, including the popular Christmas Vacation, a TV movie spin-off, the decidedly unpopular Christmas Vacation 2, yes, that exists, a recent reboot and short film, and a possible upcoming TV series. But is the original National Lampoon's Vacation required viewing? Now, Kyle, I'm sure that this is not the first time that you saw National Lampoon's Vacation, but I am very curious if this is the first time that you saw the full version and not the television version of this film.
Absolutely. Oh, Demosthenes. I was very surprised about some of the risque shiz that is in here. I saw him at that, and I was like, holy fireball, what is that doing there? Like, I didn't realize Clark said fireball that much in this movie. I'll be real. Like, whistling out of certain parts of my anatomy, I wasn't ready for that either. I was like, oh, you know.
Zippity-doo-dah, no less.
Zippity-doo-dah, indeed, my good friend. We'll get into it as we get into it, and I think you'll be interested to hear my take on, anybody will be interested to hear my take on this as we wrap up to the end, but it was a very interesting experience watching this movie this time around. This is the first time I saw the uncut, unadulterated version, and while I've obviously seen this movie before, this is the first time in a while that I've done it end to end. And I got to tell you, it was a nice, interesting surprise opening up, seeing SCTV, Second City Television, of course, collide with SNL right off the bat in this movie.
I remember when I first saw this, because my parents loved this movie. They saw it on TV. They loved it. And they eventually got me the VHS of it. I don't think they were expecting Ellen to have a psycho moment. It definitely feels a lot more dated now than when I remember. And my last viewing of it wasn't even that long ago. It was like a few years ago.
I think the main thing that's different is that when you watch Vacation, you're not supposed to take any of it seriously at all. You know, it's supposed to be ridiculous, and it should be viewed through that silly lens with that grain of salt tossed over your shoulder, et cetera, because in this day and age where fewer productions like that are a thing, and trying to be ridiculous involves things that were accidentally are now a lot more serious issues in the lexicon, it doesn't read quite the same way.
One of the things, and I mentioned this before, that makes this film strong is a lot of the comedy coming from realistic situations. And it's something that definitely benefited Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which was also written by John Hughes. I'm thinking specifically about that scene when John Candy is driving and gets his shirt sleeves caught. I mean, that scene could have fit in this movie. It might have been a leftover idea, but the scene that's analogous to this in this film is when he falls asleep at the wheel. It's heart pounding and hilarious at the same time, probably because nobody died. Even the poor little dog that got yanked out of this film doesn't like dogs for some reason.
I feel like they set the table to make that dog the biggest butthead that they could, so that the audience as a whole won't get as choked up as the cop did that told him what was going on, which, by the way, got to tell you, was my dad's favorite scene. I'm like, when the cop starts talking to him, he always starts losing his mind. But
there is a tinge of cruelty in this film. The dog scene, even as a kid, even as mean as that little damn thing was, what makes it funny is the sheriff's reaction. But at the end of the day, it's not something that I particularly find funny. Understandable how it happened. in a terrible way.
There's some what I would call like Monty Python-esque stuff here. That's very dark, but it's so ridiculous that you know it's comedy, right? Like the dog thing was a little too real. That might be why, they got letters saying, yeah, I totally done that, dude. Holy crap. But Edna, pain in the ass, that the one person who's supposed to be the most sympathetic on the trip, i.e. Ellen, even says,
sit down and shut up.
But then when it actually happens and the shock and horror takes place, then you got the Federal Express comment.
Well, we could leave her here on the first phone we pass. We could call your cousin Normie and he could come and get her, I guess.
That's the meanest, coldest.
Well, what do you want me to do? Call Federal Express?
Then you have her sitting up and being subterfuged, if that's a word, on the roof of the car. He's left there with the umbrella.
It keeps getting worse. All these scenes that we say are cruel and maybe are controversial also tend to be the scenes that people remember most about this movie. It's what gives this movie its character. And it is very much an episodic film. In many ways, I kind of liken it to the midlife crisis Alice in Wonderland starring a sheltered American family man.
There's a lot of skits and episodic, like you say, stuff going on here. And if Charles Dickens wrote a movie about a midlife crisis that was a comedy, it would be pieced together like this. That's what I'll say. One thing I wanted to ask real quick, you had made the comparison to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which I really feel like I should have before, especially since both movies have John Candy in it in some role or capacity. But if there was to be an opportunity for a who it could have been, Chevy Chase delivering the I want a fireball car. Right. Fireball now. That's interesting.
Chevy Chase in the Steve Martin role. You see, the thing is, Chevy Chase, even as a Clark Griswold character, still comes across
as a dude,
as a smartass. And
yes.
And let's face it, he works better when he's allowed to be a smartass. I think I'm not alone in saying that his best film is Fletch.
Quentin Tarantino said the very same thing talking to Joe Rogan.
When the character has a breakdown at the airport, I think it would have come across as too mean-spirited because Steve Martin, even when he has those outbursts in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, still you can see a sweetness in him. Clark Griswold, I think that half the fun of that character is knowing that despite his intentions, he's always a few steps away from having that breakdown, and part of the comedy is the anticipation of that breakdown. I think that's one of the reasons that European Vacation and Vegas Vacation may not have worked as well as this film and Christmas. With Steve Martin, when he has those breakdowns, as you mentioned, it is very out of character for him. And those scenes, at least not so much the airport scene, but when he actually does break down in the hotel and he starts ripping John Candy to pieces, that's not a very comedic scene. That is a tough scene. I guess here's the question, and I think that it won't be controversial to say that they definitely softened the Clark Griswold character a bit in Chris's Vacation, but in this film, is Clark Griswold a likable character?
Sort of. Here's what I mean. Like you mentioned Clark W. Griswold being softened. I would argue that other than in Christmas Vacation, that the thing is in European Vacation and Vegas Vacation, both the attention is taken off of Clark a lot. So he has less opportunity to be douchey.
A lot of the strife in those films are caused by other entities rather than his own stupidity.
Correct. For example, who would ever expect Wayne Newton to be involved with the potential ruin of your life? I wouldn't.
I've seen License to Kill. I would expect it.
Fair enough.
If you haven't seen it, he plays this despicable TV preacher.
He isn't likable per se. There's really no in-between idiot or douche. Like, he's usually doing one or the other. However, even if you haven't had kids or haven't been married, most Americans have sat in that car in some capacity of the family vacation and can appreciate the goal of the proctor of said vacation trying to do his best to make the good ish happen, right? I don't think any member of the Griswold family, as they approached that moose and got their initial disappointment, questioned that was Clark W. Griswold's goal all along. I have no idea why I feel compelled to say his whole name, by the way. I just find it fun.
We might as well just say Clark Wilhelm Griswold.
I was going to ask what it meant. So yes, when oh my God, Wilhelm.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when Clark Wilhelm Griswold, is he likable? Not necessarily, but everyone respects his plight. And he's not villainous enough to cheer against him. You know, Clark really screwed up when Ellen says something, and then Audrey will jump in, and then when Rusty goes, yeah, Dad, that's kind of a drag. Like, oh, snap, you know.
I don't know if even softened was the right word to use. I think in Christmas Vacation, because of the benefit of having his extended family and having his father in particular there, it explained his motivations, explore that a lot more than this film does. And I think that what makes these two films the strongest out of this series is it is about a man who is trying to recapture, downright trying to force the nostalgic memories that he has on his family.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Well, it both true in Vacation and in Christmas Vacation, right? Like if you remember the beginning of Christmas Vacation or a lot of his exchanges with Eddie in particular, he says some very off-color-ish to establish, just so you know, Clark's still a douche, but he likes his family that much that he takes it a step back, unless he's losing his mind and talking about the best Christmas since Fred Astaire and Danny Fireballing K, right?
But I think that maybe the two scenes that do threaten to make him an unlikable character is the dog scene, which you just mentioned, and also the fact that he nearly does cheat on his wife. I mean, you can even argue that, just by doing the thing he did was way beyond crossing a line.
Reprehensible is a good word, Demosthenes.
Yeah, reprehensible is a good word. And I wonder if he does enough to redeem it. I mean, I can understand. They do a decent enough job laying out why he feels ostracized. I mean, the entire film, he's trying to have sex with his wife, and it just is not going very well. And to get to the point where he wants to run off with Billy Joel's ex-wife.
We've already established that Clark is a tool, okay? So for him saying, what it is, homies, being awkward AF, no shocks here. The only reason why I was surprised is I didn't know some of that vernacular was used that far back. I forgot that that's basically like the first road, air quotes, vignette. Anybody who has a problem with the crows and Dumbo, no, leave me alone until you could rectify this. I'm just saying.
Everybody in this film is a caricature at their stereotypical worst. I mean, Eddie himself, and they're in the incestuous nature that's suggested with Eddie's family.
I'm going steady, and I French kiss.
So everybody does that.
Yeah, but Daddy says I'm the best at it.
That was the joke when I really realized, holy crap, this is a very different movie.
Yeah, that was one of the things.
Daddy says I'm the best French kisser. Okay, I don't like Eddie that much anymore. We just talked about how this film is episodic by design. It's full of many different vignettes. Some of them work better than others. Does it work well cohesively? And I think it does very much because it does have that carrot at the end. It does have that goal they're trying to get to. And the eventual twist is made stronger by the strife that they go through to get there.
Were I Clark W. Griswold at that point where you hear the sorry, I could see me punching the bejesus out of that moose. Now anything after that, I won't speak to it.
That's why the least realistic part of this film is that a theme park like that will be closed in the middle of summer for 2 weeks.
I could see me putting that moose's nose in. Oh yeah, 100%.
There's still a quite active debate about which film in this series is the best, this one or Christmas Vacation. And I'll be very interested to see in this run through if, for me, my final decision still remains the same. But would you, on its own, would you consider National Lampoon's Vacation to be required viewing.
There would have been a day where this would have been a hell to the yeah, but upon this particular viewing, and again, I've already done my preamble of signing off that I am not the SJW type. For the love of God, leave the art as a product of its time. However, I see some stuff, and even I think to myself, good God, how did some of this stuff clear? First of all, I get that it's a comedy, so and it's supposed to be a gross caricature throughout. So at that time where certain issues weren't raised and prominent, this wouldn't have been a problem. But I'm pretty sure somebody in the audience said a few things. Oh boy, that's interesting that you go right off the bat thinking that that guy's going to give him directions just to see his cousin while his hubcaps are completely removed from his vehicle. Oh boy. You're going to try to tell me that Clark W. Griswold, the biggest idiot on the planet, is that smooth a talker to not only prevent his wife from divorcing him on the spot and being able to reconcile with his wife after swimming naked with Christie Brinkley within 10 minutes. And then you expect me to believe that he manages to turn it all around so much that Ellen's willing to do the same. Stop it. Okay? I find the makeshift lack of funeral for and Edna more believable than any of that trash.
Hey, man, let's go!
It didn't sit right with me necessarily when I first saw the gun thing, but I was able to dismiss it. Now I'm like, nah, F that. This cat, no. The cops would not be going on the roller coaster with him, using a weapon to threaten security guards. I don't care if it's a damn BB gun or not.
He treated me like a dog, Mr. Wiley. He humiliated my human decency. This guy.
That's supposed to be the thing that's the saving grace is, oh, it's not a real gun. But there's been too many incidents, unfortunately, involving police and whoever else, where that's gone horribly wrong. And at this point, it's a little too damn real. I can't make it required, unfortunately, because it's not aging past that at this point. Granted, the reason why it's recommended is the stuff is still amazing for being 40 years old. There's still plenty of stuff in there that is pure comedy greatness, but I don't think it's Blazing Saddles good per se to where we're going to have, I assume if and when we do that, we're going to have this same conversation. But in this case, I feel like there would be those who would claim that Blazing Saddles should get the Song of the South treatment, if you catch my meaning. So it's definitely recommended, but I don't think it ages well enough to be required at this juncture.
This man in a midlife crisis, driven to the point where upon his ultimate failure, upon a litany of failures, he just goes nuts and pulls out a gun and tries to take over the park. Kyle, that is the joke, the fact that he went crazy, as I'm sure you understand. It is in the essence of a comedy. You know that Clark is not the type of person that would shoot somebody to death or anything. So it takes the edge off of that a little bit. That didn't bother me too much. The 80s was the decade of Caddyshack, Porky's, even Monty Python, Meaning of Life. They have an entire scene where the joke is projectile vomiting over and over. This was the era of raunch. Compared to what came after, Vacation is actually a little bit more sedate, which is why, by changing a few lines and omitting a few scenes, it could literally be turned into a family comedy for all. Yeah. It doesn't take that much to change it, to make it that. Not that I'm advocating that, but it's also in many ways, strangely enough, the godfather of the type of family comedy which persisted throughout the 90s. The hapless idiot dad, for better or for worse. The reason I'm going to say recommended and not required is that not all the vignettes worked for me. I think that some of them had potential, but they didn't really follow through. The Dodge City scene has one joke where the guy shoots a fake gun, etc. It didn't really quite work for me. I don't know why he decided to run into Monument Valley, into Navajo country, instead of following the highway back. But hey, it's a fun visual. The camping scene seems like, and as was written and with the deleted scene, it'll set up for something funnier, and it doesn't really, the dog gets in the tent. For as many scenes like the Aunt Edna dying or the car jumping 50 yards, there are a lot of other things that don't quite work enough for me to sell it as a whole required package. And I think that this is something I might get back to in European Vacation, because European Vacation is one of those films that It has been critically kind of derided as a weak comedy. A lot of people consider it the weakest of the first 3 films, but it has scenes that people still remember and quote to this day. And the real question is, are those scenes strong enough to hold the film as a whole? In Vacation, I don't think that it has as many scenes to really make it a comedy masterpiece, but enough for me to highly recommend it as a film that has left a big legacy and has in many ways shaped comedies that came after it. This is essentially the R-rated prototype for all the PG-rated comedies that we saw in the 90s.
There was a sushi joint that I go to with the wife and doing that
and Christie Brinkley.
No, you're trying to get me thrashed, Demosthenes. Listen, I thought you enjoyed me as a co-host and would not be willing to subject me to the same sort of torture the dog felt on the back bumper of the car.
You know what the penalty for animal cruelty is in this state? Well, it's probably pretty stiff.
So on the menu at the sushi place, there's an item on there called a holiday roll. And I read that, saying it properly. And when I said to the server, oh yeah, this looks interesting, I'll have the holiday roll. As I say that to the server, in my head suddenly goes, holiday roll. Ah! I'm like, oh my God. And so, that's, I went on Facebook and all that and announced it as an epiphany. But the punchline is, I'm ordering sushi, and out of nowhere, because it's a holiday roll, I'm like, come on. Another thought has come into my head. Can you imagine? Now, Rusty, I'm going to leave you here to protect the family while I go down the road and try to find a service station. I'm on a pilgrimage to see a moose.